and call the meeting to order. If you'll please join us for the Pledge of the Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to start our 3 o'clock meeting with a board workshop, but I'll go ahead and call roll for the workshop for the minutes. Our district attorney, Tony Pierce, is present. Supervisor Tinkle is present. Supervisor Banks is present. Supervisor Feinberg is present. Supervisor Dye is present. Supervisor Clarity is present. And our district manager, Chris Shoemake, is present. So with that, I'll turn the meeting over to you, Chris.
Okay. In a previous meeting, we got into a discussion about littorals, removing littorals, planting littorals, what we're doing with littorals. Some people like them, some people don't. And that kind of accumulated in bringing up a policy for littoral removal that had been drafted several years ago and that was never considered by the board or voted on, which was basically a process to remove littorals and how you do that. There was a policy that came up about allowing the HOA to make a request to remove littorals from the pond. There was also counterpoint, why don't we allow an individual resident to request littorals in the ponds? Gets to be somewhat of a complicated issue. Littorals are very prevalent over in Pelican. They do have an exemption that if you're in the fishing club, you can clean out a section of littorals. And as Mr. Gepper told me, once they passed that, they had a huge influx in membership of their fishing club. So, and I kind of as a poster child, we had a lake that came up that was one that basically had the development order requiring 3 sections of littorals, 500 plants each. You could equate that to 500 feet. So here it shows in the DO where these areas are to be planted. Well, they're planted there, but they've expanded probably to 75 or 80% around the lake bank. A couple of the residents on the lake don't like them. And they like, I shouldn't say they don't like them, they like littorals, but only a measured amount of littorals. Meaning they'd like to have the littorals on the pond that were back to the original DO area, what's required. But the rest of them they don't want there. They'd rather have that clean look on the pond. And so this workshop today, leading into policy and discussion, we have several guests from the county that work in that area, and I'd like Elle to come up and introduce them. So we'll have all the folks with all the knowledge on this here to ask questions, and we really just hope to get into a discussion about it. With the board asking the panelists here specific questions if they have them on regulation, water quality, how other folks do it. But with that, I'll let Elle get up and make the introductions of the folks we have here today.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon. Elle Harris, Gateway CDD. We have with us from Lee County Development today, Lisa Greiger, Beth Workman, and Jessica Solzer. Also with Lee County Pond Watch, we have Mr. Ernesto de la Vega. Do you want them to come to the podium, or do you want them to?
I think we did, didn't we?
Yeah, and maybe what we can do is relocate y'all up here, and then if there's some questions specific, we can just change the location.
And Chris, just so I'm clear and the board's on the same page, we've got our pond standard, and then the item that was, the policy that was being worked on that was never fully approved was really just pertaining to when the DO is signed. Is that the way we all interpret that?
Well, correct. In the pond standards, it gives a measurement there. In some cases, the development order might be larger or a little smaller. So the de facto response was, well, if the DO is silent, you can go to the pond standard. But if the DO is there and has it, it takes precedent over the
Okay,
pond
I just
standard.
want to make sure I understood, because I do remember the conversation around the
the policy around when the DO is silent. We had some conversations around that.
Maybe we could start and bring Ernesto up and just, and he does a lot of work with Pond Watch and the different group, but kind of just the function of littorals and maybe different approaches, because I'm sure you've seen the same thing. People love them, people hate them.
Yep. I'll give you a very 5 quick minutes of the benefits of littorals, because we have been seeing that. My name is Ernesto Lazo de la Vega. I work for the Lee County Hyacinth Control District, which is a special district for mosquito control and hyacinth control district. We have a program called Pond Watch, and that's to help homeowners who have stormwater ponds to manage their pond. We don't do the management, they do the management, they hire private contractors, but we advise them about how to do the best management practices in the county, Lee County, that's all we service. Now, we have about 100 ponds that has been asking our advice, and they participate in the program, for which right now I'm sampling 50 ponds monthly. So I have enough data, information, water quality, and also assessment of the shorelines of every pond. And one thing I have to say about littorals, that really, whether you like it or not, they will be protecting your shoreline for erosion. They will be cleaning the water for nutrient removal. And those are the kind of ironies. And it will enhance the habitat for other creatures like birds and little bugs who actually eat the larvae of mosquitoes. So I mean, this is kind of like the benefit of the natural look of a pond. Plus, it's aesthetically pleasant when you see ponds that are being very well kept. Most golf courses, they do that because it's aesthetic pleasant. Ponds of homeowners have now taken the lead to do that, almost like a water garden, and they take a very pride on that. So this is the few benefits, but those 3 things that I mentioned, erosion control, water quality, those 2 are the most money-driven reasons to have littoral plants. And again, the littorals, it's part of the nature of Florida to accept that, because no matter what, you're always gonna have some vegetation that is gonna grow, whether you like the vegetation, we've got beautiful flowers, or you want the weeds that are gonna be taking over, and ultimately the scum, the filamentous algae, that there will be present if you don't have other plants competing for those nutrients. That's all. Thank you.
That was quick.
I just wanted to, yeah, ping pong boom.
And if I could, maybe get Jessica to say a few words on regulation and what the county sees. And Jessica's the Director of Development Services.
Good afternoon, Jessica Solzer. As far as regulations of littorals, the county has minimum regulations of littorals. This does not negate the requirements from South Florida Water Management District to meet the water quality standards that the district puts on you as well. The county does not regulate the maintenance either of these littorals. You need to have them, the minimum requirements per our code. And again, it's reinforcing exactly what Ernesto said, those 3 things. And primarily the erosion issue. And if you guys know that you guys are we have a development order in to address those issues with erosion, that these littorals can help prevent these erosion control issues. As far as regulations, are you looking for specifics? I mean, I think you hit on them. If your development order has littorals, that's what you need. Littoral, deep lake trees, aerators for your deep lakes, these are all minimum. I wanna make sure we point that out. These are minimum requirements that the county puts, for each lake. Doesn't mean that there's a maximum. Okay?
Jessica, if you had a lake that we were talking about, that the littorals are in excess of the DO requirements, and the residents or the board decided they wanted to take some of those out to go to minimum DO requirements and satisfy it, does it require a permit to remove those littorals?
No, sir, that's considered maintenance.
Considered maintenance.
It's all considered maintenance, as long as you maintain your lake. And again, like I said, the county doesn't regulate how you maintain your lake or your ponds. The only thing the county regulates is the minimum requirements of these littorals. It does regulate the slopes. So you need to keep in mind that your slopes are regulated to your lakes. The Gateway PUD requires all lake bank slopes to be a minimum 4:1. So
Would you repeat that?
the lake bank slopes that are required for the Gateway PUD, the Plan Development Unit, Plan Unit Development PUD is 4:1.
And if we don't?
So 4 horizontal to every 1 vertical.
And if we don't?
Then you would be issued a code violation, which I believe you have in some of your lakes already.
Thank you.
Mr. Guy, you
Thank
have
you.
a
Yes.
question?
Just one. Are there occasions where the Lee County regulations and the individual DOs are in conflict?
The individual regulations as in,
Well, Lee County has a countywide regulation on littorals, is that correct?
yes, sir, and for every, we have littorals for every pond, we have compensatory littorals for hardened shorelines to make sure that you look at water quality as well. But
Well, then some neighborhoods in Gateway have DOs that require certain levels of littorals. And what I'm inquiring about is if one is at odds with the other, which one supersedes?
keep in mind that your development has grown through the years and so has the code required. Your code requirements have changed through the years, they've gone from one side to the other, so if you think you've been hopping and skipping back and forth on those code requires, so again, your development order is the one that basically, you can't say all of them need to be to this one, because it depends on when they were developed. So if this community was developed in 1994, it may not have any littoral requirements that were required in 1994. But if the community was developed in 2014, those have the littoral requirements that we have in place today.
Are the Lee County regulations retroactive?
No,
Okay, so if a community did not have a DO that required littorals when it was constructed, it still has no regulation, no requirement?
that's correct. Now, you keep in mind that you still have a district permit that you need to maintain. Now, the district doesn't require littoral, the district just requires water quality.
But by district, you mean South Florida Water?
Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
No, Jessica.
That's why I call the district, the South Florida Water Management District. I should say Gateway. The South Florida Water Management District is the one that requires the water quality.
Okay, well, I was just trying to limit it to Lee County for the moment.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Jessica, a couple
Yes,
of issues. This is confusing when you read 10-418. The intent is to put these in and try to achieve the 25% linear foot of the lake circumference. So if we have a lake, and I'm going to use Pond 3 in Hampton Park because that's the one that everybody knows about. That pond's 1,900 lineal feet, which calls for 1,900 plants, one per foot of shoreline.
Yes, sir.
What the engineer, the landscape architect did when they designed this is what I believe was the way, I think they did it right. They took the littorals and divided those up into 4 areas, one of 500 feet, or 500 littorals, 500 littorals, 500 littorals, and 400 littorals. Typically, you're putting them on that 4-to-1 slope, like you said, and you put 1 per square foot down the slope, which means you have either 3 or 4 littorals per running foot. So if you have 500, I'm gonna do this in my head with the math, so I'll do this easy. If you have 500 littorals that are going to an area, and you have 4 per foot, you're gonna have 125 lineal feet of littorals. And that's what the DO showed, which means it occupies, if they're 60-foot lots, roughly 3 lots.
Yes, sir. If
That's
your
what's
calculations are correct, yes.
That's what's showing. What has happened is those littorals, as Chris said, have expanded out.
Yes, you are not in violation of land development code. You
That's
meet
right.
the minimum requirements. Now, if you want to maintain your lakes and take the littorals from 300 feet to the 120 feet or 130, 180 feet, that's your prerogative to, as the gateway CDD, to do the maintenance on the lake.
What makes it more complicated is that at least on this set of plans, which is Hampton Park, the developer spent a lot of money to a landscape architect to come in and do this job. They did a very, very good job, whether you like it or not. They did, in my opinion, a good job. They specifically called out the areas where the littoral placement was to be. The issue is the people who have lots in areas that are not where those are, want those removed, and I think that pretty well defines the issue we have. That's the issue.
Okay, like I said, the county
That's
has
hard.
minimum requirements of where to put them, but if they spread, and they, again, I would bring up Beth to talk about it, but again, if they spread, that's the intent of it, to stabilize, bring in water quality, further your water quality, bring in habitat, but again, we're looking at minimums. If you guys wanna go in there and rip them up, you can do that, but make sure that you're not compromising that slope. You're not compromising those, nutrients, because you switch the littorals that provide you erosion control measures, that provide you the nutrient, remove the nutrients that are in there, your phosphorus, your nitrogen. That can be, and then the habitat, that take away the mosquito larvae and things like that, and you switch it to something else, i.e., debris and algae and all that. So again, that's you as the CDD, that's your option to do that.
Yeah, our problem is we have numerous ponds, well, a lot of ponds in Gateway that simply were built, constructed way before the standards came into
Way before
effect.
the requirement that was needed to address those 3 issues that Ernesto commented on. And again, we've learned from, I don't wanna say mistakes, that's not the right word, but we've learned from our past. And we've experiences, and we recognize that this is the measures we need to take to make sure that we are not, if you build your pool too close to that lake, you're not gonna compromise the structural integrity of your pool, or your shed, or your, bird pond because of erosion to that.
Another question, and Ernesto and I have been 3, 4, 5 years talking about this issue. We have, over the years, stocked our ponds with enormous amount of carp. We have in the past experienced going in and putting in littorals, and they don't last very long. It's like caviar to the carp. What is your suggestion for all of our ponds that have the carp in them to do and protect these littorals from being eaten as we plant them?
I do apologize, but I do not have that expertise to provide you directly.
I don't think anybody does.
I don't have that. I don't
And my
think-
problem is I have a.
Oh, Ernesto does, there we
I have a
go.
real problem spending a lot of money on littorals if we're gonna have littoral or have carp eat them.
Yeah, I understand that scenario because we provide some, but we didn't put those grass carp in your, that was probably a private company who did stocking. We usually don't stock like that in.
Our board did it because they were of the, this is years ago,
Correct.
was of the opinion that the carp would take care of the algae problem.
Correct, and it was completely wrong. The grass carp will eat vegetation that is on the water. However, if they get really hungry, they can tap into those littorals, those standing plants, and they will pull them out because they're very easy to remove, and then they can start nibbling on them. So they have done that.
Yeah.
Now, companies who have done this, and they know that grass carp, and they put the companies, the littoral plants companies, they put those plants and they put a fence around that, and the fence is just to protect avoid the grass carp from coming and destroying.
So like chicken wire.
Yeah, and it's a very thick, and it's pretty much established there until the plants will get acquainted and they will establish themselves. Once they get established, the grass carp will not be harassing the plants that they just stocked.
Yeah, what I've seen on almost all the plans are that, and one of them I don't understand at all, they'll show the control elevation
Mhm.
and the 4-to-1 slope, or in some cases 6-to-1 slope. Depends on later permits went 6, the older ones were 4. But they'll show the plantings to go down to the, no more than the 2-foot level. Well, 4-to-1, that's 8 feet from the control elevation down, correct? But then they call for them, and in the case of Hampton Park, which blew my mind, they went up 1 foot, which was 4 feet. I've never understood that. How did they get?
You mean
how did they
above
live?
the
Yeah.
water control?
Yeah, how did they live?
Onto the dry.
It's drier than a bone.
Well, there's,
How do they live?
sometimes depend on the time when you're planting. The best time is in the spring. You don't plant it in the winter. If it's gonna go down, then
But we've told everybody, and everybody's heeding our deal, we don't want your irrigation system down in what we call the LME. We don't want it down there. We want it to the edge of the LME, but not down into the LME. We don't want you throwing reuse water out in the lake. And it gets in the way if we have to do any maintenance, as we have found out. So if you haven't got a private irrigation system there to water it, how do they live? Everyone I've seen that's puts them in, they die.
Yeah.
They die. So I question why, and the county's picture even shows it, that it goes from the control elevation up a foot, control elevation down 2 feet. The down 2 feet makes all the sense in the world because that's where you've got your bank erosion and all that. But the up 1 foot I don't get, and Hampton Park was that way.
Let me bring another variance on, another concept there. What type of plant? Because there are some plants, and there are different species that they have
Okay.
selected. There's like a whole list, and some of them prefer to be in the water, they're standing on the water, and the other ones can be in the little zone that it fluctuates, and some other ones, they put it in dry. So you have to kind of accommodate whatever the condition is. If your pond is gonna fluctuate a lot, plant according to that. If it doesn't, then you will do the same. But it's up to the planting company to do that and to know that. If they don't know that, and then you just fire them because they don't know that.
These developers, one after another, and I'm sitting over here watching Arborwood be built, and they've got all these ponds. The other day, they brought in semi after semi after semi of sod. And they put that sod right down to the control elevation. Right smack down to the control elevation. I mean, you could cut your finger on the line as it goes around the ponds over there.
My best advice for
So-
any community who start doing this is to do a pilot in a portion of the lake, to do a pilot and do some planting and see how they come up.
Well, we're talking about doing that on 106, 107, 108, but again, I get back to the issue, 106, 107, and 108 are full of carp. I don't wanna see us spend $2,000, $3,000 on littorals to sit there and watch carp get fat.
They live up to 15 years, and I don't know when was the stocking.
Oh, we got carp, I got
Well,
carp
when
behind
did-
my house.
when did they
They're this
stock
big.
them? They
Oh,
stocked them
what,
10 years
10
ago?
10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, they can still be there.
Yes, about 10 or 15 years ago.
Now that you can hire people who go and bow and arrow them, because they do that in the morning, they track them and then,
We
and
get
then they
100,000
just,
William Tells and you ain't gonna get rid of them all. There are so many carps in our lake.
and do the fencing. That's another one.
And that's a
Do the fencing.
temporary, you put the fencing down until the soils are mature.
Yes,
enough, and
until
then
the
you
plants are
remove
well
it.
established, and then you have a very thick layer, and then they won't come back again into, take those plants off.
While you're up, another issue, and I don't want to put you or Jessica in a position of an engineering decision or having maybe some expertise or data to prove this one way or the other. We're talking a lot about littorals. My background as an environmental engineer was far more important is aeration. Far more important is aeration. Nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about it. But yet, almost every DO that's going out now, all the ponds have aeration.
It depends on the depth.
Yeah, the depth.
I can talk to
So I
that.
think my question is, why?
Hi, my name is Beth Workman. I work for Lee County in zoning. My background is botany. I have a degree in botany. In our land development code, if you are digging a deep lake, which is 12 feet or greater, you're required to put aeration in. Anything less than that, aeration is not. So anything less than that, you see aeration in lakes, it's decorative. Littoral plants are very important because, as Ernesto pointed out, they stabilize the lake bank, they filter the water for the runoff, for fertilization that's running off from the rainwater. So when your question about the transect line in the control elevation, so when we do DO review, because I did that for 12 years, you have a transect line showing the littorals 2 foot below control, and then you will have some above control. Those are stabilizers. Those are transitional wetland plants that can tolerate, I call them the jack of all trades plants. They can tolerate being dry, they can tolerate being wet. So what you don't see above, you might not see water above, but their feet or their roots are hitting some moisture in soil to survive. Now the important part is when the landscape architect designed that edge of the lake for those littorals and spec'd them to our code, that they were picking out the right plant for the right place. Canna lilies, that kind of thing. You know, pickerel weed, of course, needs to be deeper, it needs to be 2 feet below, that's for purple flowers. So it just depends on that. But those above control plants are very, very important because they stabilize. That's where we're seeing a lot of escarpment happen. I deal a lot with restoration of lake banks. And I'm telling you that we have people that go in and remove to go back to code requirement. And all of a sudden, you have invasive exotics move in, they don't have the money to maintain. Now, all of a sudden, you have this fluctuation of water because our rain, sometimes we have a rainy season, sometimes it's late, sometimes we don't have anything. So you have this huge escarpment coming down. And you have a withering away of the slope, you have no plant material, because they only are providing the minimum requirement. So what happens is, they lose their slope, they're out of compliance. The 6-to-1, if they're a newer development, or 4-to-1, becomes a 2-to-1, which is a health, safety, welfare issue. Then they come in and want a hardener, they want to spend lots of money on a turf reinforcement mat. These are all problems that, these lakes that you have right now, what I'm hearing, don't have a problem. I mean, I see people's pools caving, tilt, the water's going on one side. I've seen people's homes, you know, and this is all because they went in for aesthetics and removed these littorals. And I know that some people like them, some people don't, but it protects your real estate.
Well, the problem is, the ponds that we have selected, and we've got like 65 ponds, maybe 10 of those 65 didn't really have a major problem. So we narrowed it down, I wanna say 45, 50 ponds. So we
Right.
divided it into 3 categories of about 15 to 20 in each one.
Right.
Ones with the worst escarpment and the worst slope, and then back and so forth. But we've done, in the process of doing the first 15, and then we're going to the next 15, doing a facility plan right now, da-da-da-da-da.
Right.
Our problem is, with the exception of very few, none of those first 15, and very few of the next 15 had any DO requirement for littorals.
Yeah, and
That is the problem.
And that's the important thing to remember, that you are in a gateway of the PUD.
Older
And if,
community.
and if the PUD didn't have a requirement for littorals, and I had to look this up, I'll be honest, before I came out here, because usually if a zoning is silent on code, we fall back on code. So I had to go to our attorney, you know, our letters from the attorneys, and no, in this case with Gateway PUD, if you were in that and you weren't required littorals part of your PUD, I can't go back on 10418 on you. And so, when it comes to that,
Well, that's a major reason why we went with the hardened surfaces.
Right.
Because we couldn't maintain, we tried one pond where we put in the tubes. We pumped the sand, the runoff, the slope off material from the ponds into the tubes, the geotubes. Came back, cut the tubes, then tried to compact that soil before we did anything with it. We couldn't compact it.
no, and
It's
I've
got a
heard
silty
horror
material, you can
stories.
sit there and punch it, it won't work. So we had to go, we would have a rain event occur while we were doing the work. And this is evidence now on ponds 106, 107, 108. What were perfectly good ponds where we put in the hardened surface on 3 sides, on the golf course side that we didn't do, we're gonna have to redo them all.
Right.
They have all slept on.
And see,
The
because
soils are horrible.
if you, and there's a bunch of things that happen when you're designing a lake, besides just the biology of it. If the person, the engineer designed it, and the person who dug it, and the compaction isn't correct, or the fill is varying, you get fill from this site, you get fill from that site that's cheaper over here, you have a varying substance that you're dealing with. And then the compaction that goes on to build that is everything. Gulf Harbor, I'll give you that
Oh,
example.
yeah, been over there.
Disastrous.
It was a mess.
And it's just because of the way the compaction went down, so that, and we had to go in and look at everything and do studies on everything into what we can harden and what we could try and do TRMs, the turf reinforcement mat. And it was so difficult, because you're dealing with zero lot line in some areas. And one of the things the county staff is charged with is this water quality. Anytime you harden, you lose the water quality, so you do not meet our comp plan. And that is something that Gateway, whether you're PUD or not, you still have a comp plan to follow. So, you know, the staff is willing to work to figure something out, but it's important to get everybody on board to realize, yeah, you might think they're ugly, but what's uglier is an assessment fee, because I've seen some pretty hefty ones.
What's the difference between your 10-418 and the city of Fort Myers requirements for littorals?
Ooh, I'm not familiar with the city of Fort Myers.
Okay, the reason I ask is we have about
I
a
don't know
seven,
if, I don't know Ernesto.
we have about a 7,000-foot run of the city of Fort Myers up against Gateway.
Okay,
And residents are watching them build those lakes over there, and as I described to you a while ago, sod right down to the control elevation, and they're in a littoral within 2 miles.
yeah,
And
and I
we're trying to
mean,
figure out
one
why.
of the things I heard, like just kind of doing a crash course on what was going on out here, is that your water quality, the testing that's been done, is no problems.
There's no problem.
And so you're doing what you need to do, and as far as I know, and I know Elise is here, you know, if the discharge that's coming out of Gateway, I don't think in our system that we have a problem. So everything is clicking like it's supposed
So
to.
to me, the problem we got is more aeration would be benefited by aeration as opposed to littorals. Because what we're doing is we're getting the seasonal runoff. These guys that are doing the landscaping, they could care less about the phosphates, the nutrients and all that. They want green grass, and they want thick green grass. And they pour that stuff on, and the first time we get a rain, it's out in there, and as Ernesto knows, I did the sampling for 3 years. You could almost call it down to the week of when it was gonna happen, that we would get certain areas of Gateway, that the numbers would spike up. And to me, I think aeration would help a lot more than anything in maybe easing that.
I'm just gonna confess something. I have a problem with the green grass thing. Personally, in my own yard, it's 95% native. And I have 200 square feet of zoysia sod that I don't even fertilize. So this notion of like pumping it full of chemical to keep it green and all this fossil fuels that go into maintaining it, okay, great, you love it. But I'm telling you, you're poisoning the lake.
Tell that to a northerner.
And here's another thing you can tell them, the people who don't like littorals. You're feeding the littorals. The more fertilizer you put on, the whole point of a littoral is to soak up all that, whatever's running off. They don't see signs of, oh, they're spreading the nitrogen again, or they just soak up whatever's coming to them. So whoever it is that's saying that you need to go in and maintain, that's just gonna be continuum. Because you're just feeding them, just like you're feeding the grass, the littorals just pick it up and then spread runners and new plants, spread runners and new
The
plants.
problem is when you have developers and realtors that sell people coming from the north, that this is beautiful lakes, grass to the shoreline, that's what you get.
Well, that's
Let me
a
ask
bigger
one-
problem, but you've
one
had a question for a while.
Yeah, I do. I'd like to know, the PUD that doesn't require littorals, that doesn't mean you can't put littorals in the lakes.
And I was gonna kinda get to that a little bit, like, the county doesn't have a requirement in the books, but if, like what I would call a homeowners association outside of, like, within the PUD, if you guys wanted to make a rule overall in these areas that aren't required to have littorals, have a standard that has to go in on their own, because, and I know that people are gonna scoff at this, but this is protecting you.
Would we have to do
I
an
thought we had
LDO?
It's
My
not.
understanding, we'd have to do an LDO to do that.
Jess, if they went on their own, would they have to come in and do an LDO? Because it's
Where
not
the
code
when the
required.
development order is silent, if you wanna go in, we had this issue about 2 years ago with one of our communities that threatened lawsuit against us, that brought in an attorney and said, you come in and do
It's
it.
a type A LDO, it's $100 for you to show us where you're gonna put your littorals, and that's it.
In an area, but an LDO is necessary if you're going to
Yes,
put them
sir,
in
that's
an
an
area where the
improvement to
DO
land.
did not require it.
Yes,
what I
that's an
thought.
improvement.
And a type A LDO, like she says, $100 and does not require a landscape architect.
So like where he was talking about on lakes 106, 7, and 8, where we hardened the surface on 3 sides with the golf course side, we could put littorals there, even if it's silent. We'd have the ability to put littorals on that area.
You have a development order in right now, and if you wanna put littorals on there, just show it on your development order.
The problem with those 3 ponds, 106, 107, and 108, they're 3 little ponds over here, maybe 400 foot square, over here by Sable Dunes. The development order has a requirement for a littoral shelf all the way around. It did not have a requirement for placement of littorals. I got that from Whole Montez.
Yeah.
When they built it, when they built that, if you look at their DO, it calls out a littoral shelf, but there is no requirement for littorals to have been placed.
So it has the shelf, the
It has the
littorals,
shelf.
but doesn't have a quantity
That is correct.
in the
Because it was done way
specifications.
before 10-418.
Okay, so with that, if you wanted to, you could set the specifications as to what needs to go in there.
That's what I believe.
And I, just really fast. In another meeting I had with another community way outside of Gateway, South Fort Myers, it was Whole Montez came in, and they were asking for this community because they were having problems with their littorals. And they had problems with different residents not liking littorals. So in the meeting I told them, and this is from my background working out on Sanibel at SCCF, I used to have a binder, and I would have, like you're buying a custom home, but it was a custom littoral shelf. And I would have it in all seasons. This is what it looks like in the fall, this is what it looks like in the winter, this is like you're picking out, a home. And you had 4 different things, and they could pick, or say, I like that plant and that one and that plant and that one, and then that's what they got for their package. And so, it's like picking out appliances for your kitchen. So their yard, their home became part of the yard too, plus the littoral shelf, because they had ownership of that. They picked it out, they liked the plants, boom. Because that's a selling point for them. Now, I know it sounds cheesy, but they were involved in it. If all these things start recruiting in and they feel like, I wasn't involved in that, and this is my property, even though it's like common element. That's another thing for what you're trying to do on your own, if you wanted to come up with something like that. And it sounds like you have staff that is very familiar with littorals, so.
Mr. Banks, I think you
Yeah,
had a
I just need a couple points of clarification, and anyone on the board, feel free to chime in, or people that are here. It looks like in our maintenance standards that it does call out 25% of the total linear feet of the ponds at control elevation. So we have a standard of 25%.
Where the DO calls for
Well,
deals.
well, and then it says, for avoidance of doubt, any rights vested in the permit development order prevail over the above Lee County section. To me, that would be in excess, not if the DO is silent. I don't, am I understanding this correctly? The DO is silent. It doesn't say there's no littoral requirements, right? So if that's the case, wouldn't our pond standard of 25% prevail if the DO was silent, just based on?
We don't have that codified anywhere within the county.
No, but if it's within our pond standard, and if our standard is based on, adhering to Lee County and South Florida Water Management, your regulations, and our standard is on top of that.
Your standard is above and beyond,
It
you're more
is
than
above.
welcome to, yes.
Right? So if the DO is silent, if there's no littoral requirements, and our standard is 25%, then our standard of 25% should be what the standard is.
It would prevail for your
If the
community.
DO is silent, if the DO is, I'm just hypothetically, if it's 45% or 35%, then that would supersede the Lee County 25%, right? I mean, that's.
I understand what you're saying. The
Okay.
county is nothing, and you require 25, your 25 prevails.
So in
When we did our
instances.
pond standard notes, keep in mind, we had an asterisk that we indicated, for the avoidance of any doubt, any rights vested in the permit development order prevail over the above Lee County standards of 10-418.
Right, and to me, the way I interpret that is, if the DO is silent on no littoral requirements, unless it explicitly says no littorals, then our standard would supersede that. I mean, is that how you interpret, or in the past we'd say, if there's no littorals requiring the DO, there's no littorals requirement, and that.
Our only way, we spent a year and a half trying to write this thing. Our only way to get this before the board was to have the consent that the development order prevails and there will be no littorals in ponds that have a development order that are silent.
But that doesn't say, I guess my question is, I'm trying to get to this, and I think we had answered it once. If the DO does not have littoral requirements, it does not prohibit littorals, and our standard 25%, we could justify that.
It would be essentially your code.
It would be
in your
our code.
Yeah.
So
If you
instead
want
of
that
getting, trying to
codified-
figure out how do we,
But going back and doing it step by step, there's a process that you have to follow. The first one is the LDO. We have to submit the LDO. The minute we submit the LDO, we're gonna get sued. We're gonna get sued. We've been told that, we were
By
warned that. Silver
residents?
Lakes, HOA told us that right off the bat 3 years ago. And that's why we did it the way we did. We wrote it to avoid that very issue. I know my community, if the board would decide to go out and put on the ponds within Gateway Greens, we're gonna get sued. We're gonna get sued. People do not want them where they bought on the basis that they weren't there.
that's right.
It's that simple.
I'm not worried about the district being sued for that, because the district is not the one that sold the property. And if the district believes in the best interest of maintaining its facilities to have a particular standard, because that's one of the charges that y'all have, is to maintain your facilities.
Tony, we've had that standard for 15 years, and this board has done nothing to maintain it. I don't know why we would be doing it right now.
That's board's discussion.
And it's, I think the issues are water quality and lake bank erosion,
Correct.
because we know very well that we're spending a lot of money.
If we had serious water quality issues, I would be the first as an environmental engineer to be screaming like a pig under a gate. We don't have major water quality issues, and if we did, I would be much more willing to spend the money on pond aeration than on littorals because of the things I have said. One, you can't keep them alive because there's no water to keep them alive, and the second one is the carp are eating them. If we can get around those two, you might have a chance, but how are you gonna make them survive? That's why I wanted to see 106, 107, and 108 built and done as quick as possible, to use those as tests before we do
Yeah.
anything else.
And I have another, so Ernesto, have you found, and I know erosion, answering this question based on erosion alone is probably not accurate, because I would imagine the more littorals that you have around the circumference of your lake, the better to fight erosion. But have you found a certain percentage of littorals in the lake banks provide the highest impact, whether that impact is water quality or total erosion? Our standard is 25% along with the county. But have you seen a specific number?
Yeah, among all the pond watch samples that I have, about 50 every month, I have ponds that have littorals, and the water quality is better than the ones who do not have littorals. And I've seen that. In fact, I would like to make a paper on that, because it's like providing the evidence about the benefit of littorals, just to see that. And then as far as communities who have opted to put littorals, they have been protecting the shoreline with erosion because of that. And then one of the statements they always say is like, if we respected what the original plan, the blueprint from the community was at the very beginning, they would not be having trouble by putting and fixing the shorelines.
I guess, let me ask this another way. If your standard is 25%,
Yeah.
as you incrementally go above that, is that added value? Or at some point, because I think the issue we're running into is when you exceed a certain percentage, it really starts breaching into maybe residential areas that could be perceived as whether aesthetically pleasing or not. But the overall impact to the lake, I would imagine would be beneficial. So at 25%, is it better at 35? Is it better at 40? Is it better with 90% of?
You're right, there's a sweet point in
Yeah.
there, because I've seen ponds that are completely choked, and then that is disrupted.
That's what I'm trying to get to.
Exactly.
Where's your upper limit versus your minimum?
Somewhere between 30 or to 25 and an 80%.
Okay.
You don't want to go 100%. It's
Okay.
like in between, and in fact, it all depends on the needs for the community. Some communities that love to have that. Bird watching is strong in that community. They will put all the way around to just have habitats for birds. Other communities, no, they don't want to see them, but then, so they have areas where there is no littorals, just because they want that. So it's a whole compromising.
Okay, thank you.
I want to say a word about aeration. I know you brought the question about aeration. I've seen a lot of ponds where aeration, including golf courses, where the aeration has been in place. And the reason why they put it is not so much to aerate. By the way, aeration is not a fountain. Fountains are not for aeration. It's just aesthetic. It's the bubblers that you put in the compressor. Okay, that's bubblers are the aerations. And those kind of aerations is just to mix the water, to mix it. And as you mix it, you minimize the amount of filamentous algae, because the filamentous algae grow where the concentrated nutrients are present. By mixing the water and moving the water with the aeration, you minimize the presence of this filamentous algae. That's the trick on the golf courses. So that's the reason why they put bubblers in the golf courses. I have several examples about that. But then the other myth is that the filamentous algae will grow there, and then the littoral plants are gonna be standing there. But notice that the plants are not the ones who are sucking, this plant has rooted and they're standing on the water. They're not sucking the water out of the nutrients out of the water. They're providing surface for other type of microscopic plants, they call it periphyton, growing like scum around the stems of the standing plants, and that's where the nutrients removal happens. So you will have littorals, and you have the scum in between the littorals. That is the filtration happening there. When you have aerators, the aerators move the water as the water goes through the stems, and the water goes through, and then all this filamentous algae and algae in there. That's where the nutrients removal is happening. So it's not the plant standing that will be sucking the nutrients out, it's the filamentous that are attached to the stems. That's the beauty of this. And again, the wind, just the wind will move the water through those banks of plants, and that's where the nutrient removal is happening, plus the stabilizing and all the other stuff. So aeration helps, yes. It's constant, yes, but it will be in the long term. And besides, another thing about aeration, when you mix in the water, if you have ponds that are accumulating muck, and the muck has been just accumulating for years and years, there's a settlement of all these particles, zooplankton and plankton dying, and they just accumulating. Once you get several years of muck, nutrients are coming from that layer of muck. By having an aerator, you're creating an oxygen, all surface to bottom oxygenated zone. And that is gonna be bacteria eating that muck. So you reduce the amount of muck, and in the long run, you will have more extended life of that pond. You don't have to come back and dredge it. The aeration will remove some of that muck as you're going and you're letting the oxygen and the bacteria eating that muck. Okay,
Now,
so.
we have one more speaker, I think.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, hi, I just wanted to say a couple things. My name is Lisa Krieger, I work for the Lee County Division of Natural Resources, so I can't answer any questions like everybody else can, but, so obviously, my area of work is water quality in Lee County. And so, I wanted to bring it back simply and just reiterate that the reason that we make these stormwater ponds when developments come are there's multiple reasons, water management in communities, the fields used to build homes and so on and so forth. But the reason that these rules are in place is because these ponds are supposed to somewhat mimic natural systems that have been destroyed upon the landscape to develop. So that's the reason for these ponds. So they're providing multiple services, and one of them is water quality treatment and aquifer recharge and for all these other reasons. And if you look at natural waterways and natural wetlands in Florida, they have way more littorals than are required by rule. Having said that, aesthetically and culturally and so on and so forth, you all will decide what is best for your communities above and beyond the rules. But I will tell you that, go cautiously there, because once you get to a tipping point, once you take those plants out, your water quality is good now, but as we've all seen these last year or so in our local waterways, once you get to that tipping point, it's one of those ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure things, because it is not so easy to bring back that water quality once you've lost it. I mean, that's the truth. Once we have many ponds in our county that we work with, and Ernesto and I can give you example after example after example of folks who thought they didn't want the littorals, they were ugly and a nuisance and so on and so forth, and now their ponds, I can't tell you how much money they've spent and how much time they've spent trying to get back the water quality that they've lost, including blue-green algae on privately owned stormwater ponds. You can fly over Lee County and see it. So I would like to commend you. If your water quality is good at this point, obviously y'all are doing something right, and that's a wonderful thing. So I just wanted to bring it back